Welcome for another edition of the Official Jets podcast, powered by Amazon Web Services. EA in Florham Park holding it down. Ethan in Hoboken, 3:40 p.m. Tuesday, March 24th. On today's episode, we're going to do a little bit of draft talk. I know that it's free agency right now, but Mel Kiper of ESPN just put out his new mock draft. Basically, a ripple effect of the first wave of free agency, and EA and I will be going through the top 10 and, of course, the Jets at 11, basically see who could take who come April. We're officially just under a month away from the NFL draft, April 23rd to April 25th. And Olivia Landis caught up with Cynthia Freeland. That'll be our interview today. And really, this is the second podcast in a row where we have some breaking news right off the top. Yesterday, it was reportedly Jordan Jenkins re-signed with the Jets, and today the Jets had to say goodbye to Robby Anderson, who reportedly signed with the Carolina Panthers and reuniting with his college coach, Matt Rule.
Yeah, reportedly agreed to terms. That's Adam Schefter here a couple minutes ago. As you said, Greens, it is 3:41 on Tuesday. Things in the National Football League just continue to come in. Multiple waves of free agency. Reuniting with Matt Rule there in Carolina and a former Jet. And there's no signal caller. That is Teddy Bridgewater, of course. Robby did some nice things here for the Jets. And Joe Douglas and Adam Gase, both very complimentary of him. But with that being said, free agency is fluid. And you know this. Joe Douglas will have a plan.
All right, let's dive into some draft talk here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through Mel Kiper's 1 through 11 where the Jets select. And we're going to basically talk about who Mel slotted at each pick and then who we think could be other options for those teams. And really, when you look at the first and second pick, you think of Joe Burrow's he's been pegged to the Cincinnati Bengals from the get, so I don't really want to talk about him. And Chase Young, the same thing in Washington, especially when you think that the Redskins just traded for Kyle Allen. I know there was some speculation that maybe Tua Tagovailoa or Justin Herbert could be the guy at number 2. And really, from all along, you see a lot of the draft pundits say that the draft starts at number 3, because if you're looking for the second quarterback, assuming Joe Burrow goes 1, who's going to trade up to 3? And the two most popular answers are the Chargers and the Dolphins. But right now, the way Mel Kiper has it, no trades in his mock draft. Jeff Okudah, the cornerback from Ohio State, number 3 to the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, Greens. Okudah's the name you've been seeing there by most draft pundits for months. In fact, everybody should read up on what you've been doing with the Athletics, Dane Brugler on NewYorkJets.com. You guys are actually going to start up that series again. It's March 24th. We're less than a month away from the 2020 NFL draft. And everybody's been looking at the Lions, right, for a long time and saying that is the flashpoint. They have their quarterback in place in Matt Stafford. Does Okudah come off the board that quickly? And if the Dolphins and or the Chargers want to get up to 3, what is the price? I'm just looking at Miami right now. Just their first round picks alone, Greens. They have the 5th pick, the 18th pick, the 26th pick. I think they have more than enough ammunition when you look at their whole stockpile in 2020. They can get up there if they're targeting Tua to 3. I think Detroit, if you're looking at it from a Lions perspective, fabulous position, because you might be able to go back to 5 or 6 and get the player you want.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the Dolphins have the ammunition to get up to 3. And really, I don't know why the Lions wouldn't fall back to 5 if those two teams make a trade. It feels like the Lions could, in theory, still take somebody like Jeff Okudah at 5. I'm interested to see where the Giants go. And the Giants right now have the number 4 overall pick. In Mel Kiper's mock draft, he has them taking Isaiah Simmons, who's, he's listed at linebacker, but he's a Swiss Army knife for the Clemson Tigers. He's played safety, he's played linebacker, he's played nickel, he's played outside corner. He plays everywhere for the Tigers. And a lot of other mock drafts also have the Giants taking an offensive lineman, similar to what the Jets want to do and what the Bills did last year. You build a wall around your young quarterback, and in the offensive line scenario, such would be the case for Daniel Jones. Now, this is saying that Dave Gettleman, GM of the Giants, would go on the defensive side of the ball and take a player really that can play anywhere on the field.
Well, Simmons seems like a unique player. He might be the most versatile player in the entire draft class. Isn't that fair to say, Greens? You just mentioned everything that he did at Clemson. I'd love to be in these draft meetings when the teams watch tape of Simmons, because how do they want to use him on the next level? And I'm not saying we're moving in the National Football League now to more of a position-less player evaluation scale, I think. And Simmons is a perfect example of that. Now, if you're the Giants, though, and you have a quarterback entering his second season, and they do have a new coach there, the Giants, is he your guy? I'm not saying the Giants are going to take a quarterback at 4, but if you know he's your guy, do you want to take that investment and give him a tackle? Because the Giants do, even though they've made a move or two in free agency, they have some question marks up front, Greens.
Yes, they do. And Nate Solder's still on the team. He plays left tackle, and they had some struggles on the line last year. And, it'll be very interesting to see if the first tackle comes off the board at 4, which if the Jets were in the market, might not bode well for them at 11 based on the ripple effect. And, really quickly here, before we hear from Olivia, you look at the Chargers at 6, another possible trade up option, or maybe they just sit where they are. And I know basically every mock draft has them selecting either Tua or Justin Herbert, whoever the Dolphins do not select in each person's respective mock draft. But then I've also seen a couple mock drafts, and I want to get your opinion on this, that have the Chargers taking a tackle to protect whoever plays back there, assuming it's not Justin Herbert or Tua.
Well, I'm looking at the Chargers right now and saying, I think they've already made some line improvements. Trey Turner's there. They picked up Brian Bulaga in free agency, the former longtime Green Bay Packers right tackle. So Pouncey, you're hoping, if you're a Chargers fan, that he is going to be your center for 16 games next season. So I think they've done a couple of moves here in free agency where they fortified the line quite a bit. I still think the play for them is going after a quarterback. I'm just wondering if the Dolphins and the Chargers have both their mindset on getting Tua no matter what. The wild card here is the Carolina Panthers. Yes, they reached agreement with Robby Anderson, according to Adam Schefter today. But they also officially released Cam Newton. Would the Chargers and Anthony Lynn be interested? They got Tyrod Taylor there, a veteran who did some nice things with the Buffalo Bills. But would the Chargers, moving into that new stadium, want to take a flyer on Cam Newton?
Yeah, I think that's I think it'll be fascinating to see where Cam goes, where Jameis Winston also goes. He remains unsigned as we record this podcast. It could break any second that he reportedly agreed to terms somewhere. But for now, let's hear from Olivia Landis, who spoke with Cynthia Freeland. And then on the backside, we'll go through 7 through 11.
Now, before we kind of got rolling here, we were talking about some of the stuff you've been doing to keep yourself occupied. And you mentioned how you're dabbling in some teaching right now.
Listen, I have a lot of friends with kids, and they're having a hard time with this homeschooling. And one particular area that is a really big source of concern, math, where I have some expertise. I am not a teacher, and I give so much more. Every day I have more and more respect for teachers, because I'm not going to lie to you, watching and listening to what these kids have to, these parents. So I've been basically trying to take some of my football knowledge and football experience and turn it into hopefully fun lesson plans. And then kids have been sending me homework, and we go over it in small groups on Zoom. So I am not a teacher, but I'm pretending to be a teacher during this quarantine time to help the parents out with a little bit of math, a little bit of fun too.
It's awesome that you're using your skills to help others. So hopefully we will see see
Not
more
a
of
math
this
teacher, but I'm
in
trying.
the future.
Just
But
trying.
you're
You and
trying.
the math teacher, self-appointed.
It gives a huge perspective, right? And a lot of appreciation for
Oh my gosh.
educators. Definitely
so
not easy.
hard. It's so hard. So hard. So
Well, Cynthia, I want to dive a little bit more into what you do for the NFL Network. We already mentioned how you are a data scientist and predictive analytics expert. You actually do a lot of content with the Jets. When you look at your job and this free agency period with how unique this has been with the coronavirus pandemic going on, how exactly does a data scientist or predictive analyst expert play into the role of free agency and predicting what can be some of the best met needs for certain teams?
So it's really about having a plan, being collaborative, and then executing that plan. Now, I think the first day of free agency, people were like, what are the Jets going to do? They have so many needs, blah, 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 blah. And people were, it didn't seem like the big splashy moves were going the Jets' way, which honestly was really good. Then you see the deals start to come through. You see a corner that really played above average last season, Brian Poole, being re-signed for $5 million. That is a great contract. It is
a good snag.
What's that?
I said a good snag for sure.
A great snag, because it's all about return on investment for the strategy that you want to enact, right? So if your strategy is to play defense with the pieces you've already paid for, CJ Mosley was a big acquisition last year. So now you have to take the pieces that you have and, look, the run defense for the Jets is a huge source of strength last season. The pass defense could use some work. So reinforcing that with the right types of players at the right price, that's really how you create the best strategy to win, especially in a division that now, it's anyone's division, really. There's a lot of question marks kind of on every team, and you have a quarterback that your coach believes in, which, by the way, that's a really big deal. So there's a lot of really interesting things happening, and reinforcing the O-line, figuring out how to protect your asset. The most valuable player on any team is the quarterback, just is, right? So ultimately, finding ways to reinforce the assets that you already have. You've already paid for Lev Bell. It's a sunk cost. You can't go back and reconsider it. You have to take the $198 million for this year's cap and allocate it in a way that gives you the best chance to win. And that's really, I've been really, it's not a sexy offseason for the Jets, but, I don't mean to, sure, Brian's Poole, great, super sexy, great. But like bunch of old linemen, 300-pound men, also sexy, sure. Not super flashy, but very meaningful and impactful.
Well, when you look at the Jets specifically, and I know that you were talking about finding the pieces that already worked, implementing them. And, the Jets haven't, like you said, necessarily made a huge splash in that first wave of free agency. But when you take a look at the green and white and some of their needs at this point in time, when you consider some of the data that you are reviewing on a day-to-day basis, what sticks out to you most about some of the immediate needs of this team?
Well, obviously, look, I spent a lot of my thesis when I was in school and, figuring out how to really become impactful in the sports analytics space in football, particularly because my background, I worked actually at the league office on Park Avenue in a financial strategy capacity ahead of the last CBA, trying to figure out what's the right blend of product and product for the league office. It's games, right? Is it 16-4, 17-3? How many playoff games? It's funny because I was in the league office ahead of the last set of negotiations, and the same things came up in this set of negotiations. It's really interesting to see how it all evolved. But as I was doing that, I noticed that there was a void in being able to really connect the dots with, on field and create a strategy that was team specific to create the best product, AKA chances to win as defined by a team, right? So when I look at what the Jets' needs are, I think, look, they've started to address the O-line for sure, but you almost can never address an O-line too much, right? Like, you can keep, trying until you get the right combination. And then, by the way, like, do you want to run outside zone rushing, or what? How do you want to use Lev Bell best because you paid for him? He's there. And how does that work with Sam Darnold? And oh, by the way, there are questions at wide receiver, and you got to solve those too. And in such a deep class and in the draft for wide receivers, that's an interesting sort of like, well, how do you want to play that strategy? Which one's your favorite? Which one matches what Adam Gase wants to do? How do you want to make it all work together? And by the way, there's 4 tackles in this class that are really strong, would be great fits for the Jets. And I say tackles very specifically, right? So for me, shore up the tackle, figure out how to use the new pieces that you got. Yes, George Fant is now there. I'm aware, I'm following it too, but you can almost never address an O-line too much.
And I think the work that you're doing is so absolutely incredible. And I think it's something that's been missing from the NFL for a really long time. I wanted to circle back really quickly. You did mention the offensive line, and we've already seen Joe Douglas taking the steps to address the offensive line. But I wanted to circle back on something you had said, mentioning how you noticed there was something missing, and then you were able to come up with this approach. And I'm assuming you had to pitch it and then be able to get where you're at today. What were some of the other steps that you had to take to implement this new approach that you've brought to the NFL? Because I think it's been so valuable for so many teams.
Thank you. I like that. Ultimately,
absolutely.
Like anything else, just like your job, just like, an accountant or a teacher or any job, you have to, there's an element of trust in being able to deliver. Like, so your boss says, Olivia, you work from home during this time, create these podcasts, make content that we want. There's a level of trust there that you're going to do the things that are, you have an understanding of what your audience is looking for and how they can find it. It's the same thing with analytics in sports. The good teams have a lockstep between coach and front office and their analytics staff in the scouts. They use all of the tools available in their tool belt, and analytics is one that helps create strategy. But when it comes to me, and because I touch all of the teams, I get a chance to speak to many teams, and I get a chance to try to, look, I'm lucky. I'm super lucky because I get to tell really positive stories because, when you're covering all of the teams, then, what is a bad thing for one team is actually often a good thing for another. So you're trying to find positives, and I'm able to be useful because teams will ask me, they'll be like, Cynthia, can you help me when I consult for teams? They'll be like, can you help me like structure and organize the analytics staff that I have so that we can solve a question about, I'm going to use one that's absolutely not the Jets, just because to keep everything, because trust is a big deal, right? Help me figure out which running back we should target of these 5, given that we want to do this, and help me structure my team so that the people who are my analytics staff here, they're feeling more useful. That's what the good teams are doing. And I feel that's my favorite type of project because then I get to help people kind of like, I think maybe I'm always a teacher, right? Like now that I think about this,
yes, it sounds like it.
Yeah, but I want people to feel happy and satisfied. And math isn't very sexy. It advanced math and going through and trying to, a lot of it is writing computer code, also not necessarily the most sexy thing, right? So, you want to be around football, and football is so much fun, and the energy, and you get wins and losses, which is like, that's awesome in life. And they're almost inconsequential wins and losses. Like when I was a banker, you have a loss, like you can get fired and it's scary, right? You have a loss here. Yes. Eventually, if you have too many losses, you get fired. But you get a chance next Sunday again to go out there and prove yourself. So it's interesting to see when you talk to teams, making people useful and strategizing how to use all of the different things available to us. There's so many different data points now with the next gen stats coming out, with people learning how to write different types of computer code. There's tons of different ways that you can be useful, and it's really about how to create the structure that the coach trusts and the GM trusts and that people can use.
Thanks to Olivia and to Cynthia for joining the official Jets podcast. Yeah, let's pick up right where we left off here so we can get in 7 to 11 because we're going to have a lot of thoughts once the Jets are on the board. You mentioned the Carolina Panthers. Mel Kiper has them selecting Derek Brown, the defensive tackle out of Auburn, who's widely regarded as the best interior guy. Javon Kinlaw is also in that conversation, but Derek Brown's he didn't test well at the combine, but his tape is so good. And I think the Panthers also, I'm kind of viewing this with a jet scope. So a lot of mock drafts have had receiver and O-line at 11 for the Jets. And I think the Panthers probably not in the market for a receiver at 7, but they could be in the market, I would assume, for a tackle at 7 also.
Yeah, but you think about Rule and what he did, a great job at Temple, and then he goes to Baylor, and that program was in ashes when he got there. And what they did last year, going to the Big 12 title game, they were a couple quarters away from making the college football semifinals. So outstanding job on the college level. Now he's taking his shot in the National Football League with Carolina. Brown, the more you talk about Rule, the more I think he does make sense there because Rule's background is defense.
Let's just keep things rolling. We're looking at the Cardinals now at number 8, and Mel Kiper has them selecting Tristan Wirfs. And a couple weeks ago, this was a popular spot for CeeDee Lamb, who played with Kyler Murray at Oklahoma. And CeeDee Lamb's the receiver. And now that they've traded for DeAndre Hopkins, probably looking at a tackle here, or depending on how certain things play out ahead of them, maybe they look at somebody like Derek Brown if he falls, or Isaiah Simmons, or even somebody, I don't know if he would fall this far, but somebody like Jeff Okudah, maybe he makes sense for the Cardinals at 8 because Patrick Peterson's getting up there in age. And I know they picked Byron Murphy last year in the second round, but maybe they want to improve their secondary. I think the Cardinals are really interesting, actually.
So they already fortified the tackle position, but you could set yourself up for a long time if you go tackle here. And you just made an investment, number 1 overall, Kyler Murray. Now you give him the shiny new toy who, for my money, DeAndre Hopkins is as good as any receiver in the National Football League. He's always open, Greens. He physically is just a beast, and he makes the extraordinary look ordinary. Wouldn't it be interesting if they took another tackle here to protect Murray, who has great movement skills? Or you definitely could see him going with receiver too. And who would it be? Because it seems to me, Greens, and you talked to Dane about this a lot during your prospect profile series, that Lamb is more the thicker guy, stout, and Judy is probably more in short area spaces, the quicker guy, maybe the more accomplished route runner. But both of these guys are tremendous targets. And who's your head coach? Cliff Kingsbury.
No doubt about it. And I think the Cardinals are going to be interesting because they could go in a number of ways. And when you look at the Jaguars at 9, this is interesting too, because Gardner Minshew is clearly won the job over Nick Foles, who was traded to the Bears. And Mel Kiper has the Jaguars selecting Javon Kinlaw, the defensive tackle out of South Carolina. Now, the Jaguars also have 2 first-round picks. So do they want to make a move for a quarterback and move up, or do they sit where they are and take whoever comes to them, or do they also want to trade up for somebody else like, I don't know, let's say Isaiah Simmons, just to say somebody as an example? They have the ammunition to load up if they want. They also have like 3 third-round picks, or 2 or 3 third-round picks and 3 fourth-round picks. Like, they're loaded. They have the ammunition to go where they want.
Greens, I don't think the Jaguars trade up unless they're targeting a quarterback. They are not going to move up unless they have a quarterback in mind. And then also, what's going to happen with that great pass rusher there, who they just franchised?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting. You're talking about Yannick Ngakoue of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Right. Yeah, why don't you pronounce it for me? Ngakoue, yeah. Bottom line, they just put the tag on him. He wants a long-term contract. Would he be on the move draft weekend? Will they entertain offers? Will teams be calling the Jaguars up? Because most teams in the National Football League, those are the 2 things you're going to target on defense. Needs. pass rushers.
Yeah.
You never can have enough pass rushers in the NFL. The second part of that equation, of course, is cornerbacks.
In Mel Kiper's mock draft, we're now at number 10 of the Cleveland Browns, and most mock drafts from a Jets perspective have had them taking a receiver or an offensive tackle. In terms of offensive tackle, in Kiper's mock draft, the second one comes off the board at 10. The first one came off at 8, Tristan Wirfs. The second one is Mekhi Becton, who's the mountain of a man going to the Cleveland Browns, who agreed to terms, and I believe that they confirmed that they signed Jack Conklin this free agency period.
Well, yeah. So the fit there is Becton a guy who can project at left tackle on the next level? Because at Louisville Greens, he was playing on the right side, correct?
He played this past season on the left side and the year before that on the right side. So he has experience at both.
Okay, so at 360 plus, is that guy going to take care of Baker on the left side? Because we've talked to certain people who think that he's best suited to play on the right side on Sundays.
Mekhi Becton, Tristan Wirfs, Jedrick Wills, and Andrew Thomas have all played right tackle at one point or another in their collegiate career. The only two that have played the left side are Mekhi Becton and Andrew Thomas. And so far in this mock draft, Becton comes off at 10, Andrew Thomas still on the board when the Jets select at 11. And now let's dive in here. The New York Jets in Mel Kiper's mock draft select Jedrick Wills, the offensive tackle out of Alabama, over the other tackle, Andrew Thomas, and they have their pick of the litter at receiver in this scenario if they so choose.
Yeah, and listen, don't you think the Jets are going, if they stay at 11, this is likely, not exactly the way Kiper put it out here as far as the top 10, but this scenario, you could certainly envision it, where no receiver has been taken off the board. And you're looking at Lamb and Judy, and at least one tackle, maybe two tackles. And if you're Joe Douglas, I think that's a great situation to be in, if this is the way how it plays out.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I've seen mock drafts, EA, that have all four tackles off the board by the time the Jets select at 11. And that could change. That was before the free agency period opened. So free agency obviously has a big ripple effect for the draft. And I think it'd be really interesting to see what Joe Douglas does, especially when you factor in what we just learned at the beginning of this podcast, that Robby Anderson signed or reportedly agreed to terms with the Carolina Panthers. So,
and let me add something here.
It wouldn't shock me at all if Joe Douglas decided to pick a receiver, no matter who he signs in free agency.
Okay, Green's a couple updates in free agency too. Earlier today, national reports, Philip Dorsett, who played the last 2 years with the New England Patriots, had 4 touchdowns each of the past 2 seasons with Tommy TB12 throwing him a football. He has agreed to terms with Seattle Seahawks. Emmanuel Sanders had system familiarity with Adam Gase, experienced a lot of success with him in Denver a few years back, a little bit of an older guy, 33 years old, I think now. He signed on to play with Drew Brees, 41-year-old Drew Brees in New Orleans. So free agency certainly is not done, but a couple of those more prominent names, I guess, have come off the board. Expect the Jets to continue to fill out the roster as we go. We know that's going to happen. So many waves and multiple tiers of free agency. But this is when you have to trust your evaluations, meaning, so when these guys go and they look at their overall board, where is Lamb? Where is Judy? And then where is the tackle, whether it be Wills, whether it be Becton, where are they? And are they close together? And what is more of a need? Because you never go need over best player available. But if it's close, Greens, then that's when the tie comes into the equation. We don't know. These are not finished products yet, the Jets offensive line, nor the Jets receiver group, of course, especially on a day we're hearing about Robby Anderson agreeing to terms with Carolina.
Yeah, I think that the Jets in this scenario are in a very good spot because they can select a tackle, assuming that they have a good grade on one of the tackles left available. Of the core four, that would be Jedrick Wills, who Mel Kiper pegs to the Jets, or Andrew Thomas. And then, to your point, pick of the litter at receiver. So I think the Jets are in a good spot. And Matt Miller said this is how I'll close out the podcast. In terms of Jerry Jeudy, he said, when I watch Jerry Jeudy, I see Odell Beckham. And then when you think of someone like CeeDee Lamb, I've heard him compared to more of a similar game to DeAndre Hopkins. Not to say that any of those two players are going to become, Pro Bowlers, all pros like Odell and DeAndre Hopkins. But if you want to describe their style of game, those are the comparisons that are being made to the top of the class in the current state of the NFL. And I've also seen Dane Brugler said that when you look at Jerry Jeudy, he has a very similar game to a former Alabama first-round pick in Calvin Ridley. Extremely sharp route runner, gets open, good hands. So the Jets are in a good spot regardless of what happens.
Final word here on the tackles. I just wanted to get your comments here. Wills, okay. real quickly. Wills, more draft pundits right now projecting him right tackle, correct?
Yes, because he's played right tackle in all of his high school career and collegiate career.
Right. So obviously teams are going to look at him at left, but they might just say, hey, listen, lock and load. We're putting him on the right side, something to consider.
I think this offensive tackle class up top is probably one of the better ones, at least from a projection standpoint, that we've seen in the past. And to what we've been saying all along here at 11, if this is the way the draft shakes out, the Jets are in a good spot.
Andrew
to either
Thomas
select
could be a hell of a player too. And I know that was the guy a lot of people were talking about before the year. And now these other three guys did play awfully well, maybe interviewed well, performed, had done nice jobs throughout the offseason. But I would say Andrew Thomas, let's not think about him in the mix in addition.
Yeah, I think I talked about this with Charles Davis at the Combine, and I asked him, don't you feel like Andrew Thomas might have slid down in the rankings just because he's been under the microscope for longer than the rest of these players? It's almost like you forget that he's a very good player. He's anchored the left side of the line for Georgia the past 2 seasons. Again, would it make sense to draft a receiver at 11, whether it's CD, Jeudy, even somebody like Henry Ruggs? Yeah, as long as it fits your scheme and as long as the grade is proper and it's not too rich in your eyes at that spot.
4
and that's
picks in
all
the
we
top
have.
79, Greens.
You bet. And the Jets could very well take receivers in rounds 2 and 3. And Jets have some ammunition too. And we'll break that down as we get closer to the draft. And that was a little draft-centered podcast here on the official Jets podcast powered by AWS. EA and I back tomorrow with another pod. Free agency, draft, we cover it all here. EA, keep doing the work from home, keep grinding, and we'll talk tomorrow.
Yeah, man. The sun is out. I love it. I got to get outside.